pastor of Pullen Memorial Baptist Church here in Raleigh. For 125 years, our church has stood with you on the side of justice, and we continue to do so, and it's my pleasure to be here today to MC this day. It is our historians and our scholars who have set the context for us for the fight and the struggle that we are in. It is important that we know the historical context in which we come to this moment in history today. Dr. Timothy Tyson, who teaches at Duke and at Chapel Hill, who wrote the book Blood Done Signed My Name, who was born in Rex Hospital right here in Wade County, who went to the public schools of Wade County. Welcome Tim now to come and speak to you.
Thank you. It is beautiful to see you. In the book of Isaiah, God offers two invitations. In the first chapter of Isaiah, it says, "Come, let us reason together, saith the Lord." Now, as a scholar, I like that. Our predicaments about race, poverty, and public education are complex, but they are comprehensible. They have a history that we can learn and understand. We are snared in our historical moment, but we need not remain so. If we understand our history, we can transcend it together. Our dilemmas began with the Atlantic slave trade, which was not about hate. If Europeans had hated Africans, they could have put up signs all around Africa that said, "Don't go in there, there's Africans, it's full of Africans." It was about money. It was about money. Race, as we think of it, did not even exist as a concept. What we call race was invented by the wealthy planters to justify the slave trade. It was a way of saying, these people are not God's children. We are, but they're not. It was useful, this idea of so-called race, because it divided poor whites who gained nothing from the system of slavery from blacks who gained nothing from the system of slavery. Neither poor Europeans nor enslaved Africans benefited from the system, and sometimes they threatened to get together and overturn the social hierarchy in which they were caught. And so race was invented to keep us apart. A legal construction, a cultural and historical construction. Laws against so-called miscegenation. In the 1680s, they changed the English common law. For centuries, your status as a human being followed your father. Patriarchy, some of you may have heard of it. Right, your status followed your father. But they changed the law in the 1680s throughout the colonies so that your status followed your mother. That way, when white men fathered children of black women, they did not create a huge class of free blacks, social status unknown. They created more slaves. By raping his slave woman, he put money in his pocket. You may have noticed we come in a variety of shades and hues. It is important, I think, to remember that this is what created the devil's den of invidious distinctions that we call race, and which has divided us ever since. I think it's peculiarly Southern and kind of touchingly human, actually, that Thomas Jefferson wrote the words, "All men are created equal by the light of a lamp that was fetched to him by his blood kin, to whom he held a deed." Any wonder we're crazy? Now, getting back to education, North Carolina forbade the enslaved Africans to read or to learn, to preach or to teach, at penalty of 39 lashes on your bare back, which is about halfway to being beaten to death, in case you're wondering. North Carolina law forbade the enslaved to learn to read or write, but they did so anyway and learned, and then those among them who did read the Bible for themselves, and the faith that had been used to subjugate them, they turned into a theology of liberation that said that Pharaoh's army will never make it across the Red Sea. That said that Daniel would not die in the lion's den. Black hunger for education persisted after emancipation. You may know that in Wake County, right after emancipation, white conservatives closed down all the schools rather than integrate them.
That's right.
But a white woman named Gertrude Haywood Trappier, over on Salisbury Street, not far from here, defied the law. She built a school on Salisbury Street for the newly freed children. The black community organized their own schools. Within a few years, most of the African American children in Raleigh were enrolled in schools, even though there were no schools. And in 1868, a white preacher named Samuel Ashley and a black AME Zion bishop named J.W. Hood created the first system of free public schools in North Carolina. And they put it in the Constitution. They wrote that we have all of us have a right to a sound, basic, equal education. It is still in the Constitution. J.W. Hood, Reverend Hood, they tried to segregate that first system of schools, and he fought it, and he prevented them from putting race in the organic law of the state. He said, if you separate us by race, then the Negro children will have shabby schools that are not cared for, and white children will have the best. We must be in the same. He could not win a complete victory, but he was able to keep race out of the organic law of education in North Carolina, the only place in the South where that victory was won. A century later, NAACP lawsuits from across the South and across the country led to Brown versus Board of Education, which said that separate schools create a badge of inferiority and that separate education has no place in public education. It is still the law. 17 years after 1954 was when North Carolina finally obeyed federal law. Have you ever been pulled over and gotten a 17-year extension? Anyway, they created a plan to create barriers for implementation. They made provisions for private schools with public money if we had to integrate. They lobbied for neighborhood schools, so-called. They lobbied against so-called forced busing. Forced busing is busing where there's a diverse school at the end of the line, in case you're wondering how that expression works. If we raise our voices like a trumpet, if we cry out loudly to undo the bonds of the yoke, if we let the oppressed go free, if we break every yoke, if we divide our bread with the hungry, if we do this, God will say, "Here I am," and our light will rise in darkness. Isaiah says, we will come to be like a watered garden, like a spring whose waters do not fail. We will raise up the age-old foundations of our struggle and be called repairers of the breach, restorer of the streets for people to live in. Carolyn Coleman.